Hi there! I'm going to show you how to make the environment for level 2. First, I want to show you the finished product. Starting from a new blend file, let's go ahead and delete the cube. Next, we're going to want to add a plane. To add a plane, let's go up to this Add menu. When you click it, a drop-down menu appears and we'll select Mesh and then Plane. Let's go to the top view. To go to the top view, you're either going to want to hold the accent key on your keyboard and then select top, or you can press 7 on your number pad. We're going to want to scale both by the X and Y axis, so let's start with the X. With the object selected in object mode, and to know if you're in object mode, go over here and simply read and see if it says object mode or edit mode. We're in object mode, so with it selected, press S and then X, and then move your cursor away from the object slowly and you'll see that you start to scale the plane. Next, we're going to want to do the same thing but on the Y-axis. With the object selected, press S and then Y, and then slowly move the cursor away until you get a rectangular shape. Next, we're going to want to go into edit mode so that we can select this face here, because we're going to want to extrude it to create a rectangular prism instead of this 2D rectangular plane. To get into edit mode, either press tab on your keyboard, and you'll see here this changed from object mode to edit mode, or you can click this drop down menu and select it here. You're going to want to be in face select. Right now we're in vertex select. There's also edge select. These both will let you select individual components like a vertex or an edge, but for now we're just going to want to select this face here, the face that makes up the entire plane. And then we're going to want to extrude. Let's go into front view. You can do that by pressing the accent key and going into front, or by pressing 1 on your number pad. And with that face selected, let's go ahead and press E and then move your cursor up right about here. So here you go. All we had to do was create a plane and extrude its face up, and we have the walls of our building. Now that we have the mesh created, I'm going to show you how to map the UV layout. UV mapping is the process of wrapping a 2D texture over a 3D model. In order to do that, we need to unfold the 3D model in ways that it can lay down flat. The first step that we want to do is to apply our transforms. To do that, make sure you're in object mode, select your mesh, and then hold Control and A. The Apply menu is going to come up. Go ahead and select all transforms. Now we're going to want to start marking seams. Let's go to the UV editing workspace. Click this workspace tab up here that says UV editing. On the left here is an editor called the UV editor. This is where we are going to be rearranging the UV layout after cutting it on the right side, where we've got this 3D viewport. Make sure you're in edit mode. Press A with your cursor on this side to select everything. Right now, this is our UV layout, and it still has that automatically generated cube shape. What we need to do is mark seams and unwrap it. Seams are edges that we're going to choose to make cuts in our mesh, so that if separated on those cuts, the mesh can be unfolded and lay out flat. Luckily, we want to cut all of our edges, so go ahead and switch to edge select. Make sure you're still selecting every edge, go up to the UV menu tab and select Mark Seam. Now each one of these sides is its own individual cut. Make sure everything is selected by pressing A again, and now we're ready to unwrap. Another way to go to the UV menu is by holding U. Go ahead and select this unwrap option. Now you can see that instead of all of that geometry folded on top of one another, we have the different sides. There's one, here's one, and there's one. These 4 long sides, and then the 2 short ends right here. I'll demonstrate by selecting them individually on the right side because that will cause them to appear on our UV editor to the left. I'm going to press Face Select, and I'm going to select this face, hold Shift, and select the other end. You'll see that, yep, these indeed are the 2 ends. And yep, and yes, that's what these are as well. These are sides. Something that I like to do as a best practice while I'm modeling is when I get to this point where the UV is cut and I am about to start rearranging everything, I like to use a UV map checker texture. I found one on the internet and I'm going to provide it for everybody here. I find it more useful than Blender's UV grid, which I'll also show you how to use, but if you're just as comfortable using Blender's UV grid, then that's totally fine. This is a resource completely meant to help you. So if it doesn't help you the way I'm saying it, definitely feel free to use it in a different way. Although I will explain to you why I choose my image over Blender's UV grid. Go up here to the Workspace menu and click on Shading. Now we're in the Shading workspace. To the left is a file browser, and below that an image viewer. To the very right is the outliner editor and the properties editor that we're used to, but at the bottom is the node editor. This is where we're going to create, access, and modify the material that we're putting on our 3D mesh. We don't currently have a material, so click this button that says New with a plus next to it. Make sure you're selecting your mesh before. This is the node editor. It might look a little bit intimidating, but don't worry. All we are seeing is 2 nodes, a material output, and a shader that's connected to it. This shader controls things like the color of the mesh, whether or not it has a metallic-y finish on it, a glossy finish, whether or not it has a smooth texture or a rough kind of matte texture. It has a lot of different options here, including emission, which is a glow effect. What we want to do is we want to replace the base color with an image texture. To do that, we have to create another node. To add a node, hold Shift and A. It'll bring the Add Node menu. You want to go to Texture and then choose Image Texture. Just bringing this on and left-clicking to position it doesn't activate anything. However, we need to connect this color to the base color. This means that the color of this image texture, so the entire image, is going to be represented as the base color. So click this yellow dot and drag outward to make a connection. When you get closer to these dots, it's going to snap. Choose the base color and release to make that connection complete. It shows up black because we don't have an image selected. So let's go ahead and see that default UV grid that Blender has for us. Click New, and this is going to have you generate a new image based off of templates that they have. And this is going to allow you to create a testing image where it says generated type. Change blank to UV grid, and then press OK. So you see what it did there is it wrapped the texture all the way around that. If you go back to the UV editing workspace, we can see clearly how the UV shell is affecting our texture. They placed the texture image right down on the UV layout, and whatever is under that part of the shell the shell being these individual parts. That is also called an island, by the way. That's interchangeable. So you'll hear me throughout these tutorials call them islands or shells, but they both mean the same thing. To see even more what I mean, go up to the viewport shading options and select Material Preview. I'm going to select one of these faces. It's going to make that part of the UV shell, or it's going to make that part of the UV layout appear. If you move it around, you'll see that the texture moves around too on the mesh. The reason why I don't prefer this is because it can be harder to rearrange my UV shells. It's harder on my eyes to look at all of these colored pluses. So what I'm going to do is show you how to change it to your own image. Go back to the shading workspace. Press this little X right here to unlink the data block. Press open and then select your image. You'll see my image has a grid-like pattern, but it has numbers on it as well. That way we can see which direction the UV island is oriented and whether or not we need to rotate it. The numbers are also very crystal clear. It's much easier to tell if there's any stretching going on. Let's go back to the UV editing workspace. Select everything by pressing A on your keyboard. Something I like to do is select everything by using the box select, click and drag to create a box, release it, and then drag everything selected up so that you can better see the individual UV islands. It's harder to see when it's on top of here, especially when you don't have anything selected. My eyes have a hard time differentiating some of these shells. So moving it out of the way is really helpful because then I can take each individual part and assemble it where I want to on this space here. I deselected, but you can rest assured that the UV shells are still right there. We just can't see them for now. We only see whatever is selected on the right hand side 3D viewport here. Let's press 1 to get into front view. In face select mode, go ahead and select this face, and then on the left hand side select that face and drag it down. I am going to try to orient it the way I'm looking at this object on the right, so I'm going to rotate it so that the numbers are rotated correctly, or so the numbers are right side up. To do that, I'm going to press the R key on my keyboard and then 90 on my keyboard. Then I'm going to left click or press enter to confirm that. Now you can see it's nice. We're seeing the same shape here, and you can see exactly how it's represented. Let's go to the top so that we can figure out which UV shell we want to drag up here. Press the 7 button on your number pad, and then instead of selecting the top face by left clicking, hover over the face in face select mode and press L. That's going to select that without deselecting your previous selections. Now I'm going to select that island, drag it to where it's supposed to be, and we need to rotate it, so I'm going to press R again and then the number 90. And let's set this right on top. You want to make sure that there's a gap, because if these lines are too close, it's easy for the texturing artist to accidentally overlap their textures. Now let's go to the right side here. We need to figure out what we are going to put on this right side. Let's press the 3 on your number pad and press L to select this face. Now we can select that in the UV editor window and drag it to the right hand side. This one's also sideways, so I'm going to rotate it by pressing R and 90. Now we want to get to the left side. There's no number pad key There's no number pad shortcut for that, so we're going to press the accent key on the very top left of your keyboard and press left. Hover over that face and press L. Now we're going to drag that to the left-hand side. This island doesn't need to be rotated 90 degrees, it's completely upside down, so we need to rotate it 180 degrees. So let's type R and then the number 180. I hope you're starting to see how these four faces are also these four faces. The front one, the sides, and the top. This is just if you would unfold them and straighten them out into a flat texture. Let's go to the bottom by holding the accent key and releasing over bottom. Press L over the bottom face to add it to our UV editor, and let's drag that down. This one's also upside down, so let's press R 180. Let me show you a great way to tell that you are on track with arranging your UV shells. I'm going to select the entire thing here, and when I move it around, you should be able to see the texture move in a cohesive way over on this side. That might be a little confusing, but you'll see quickly what I mean. I'll click this and move it to the right, up, down. So I'll zoom in here at this corner to get a better look. You've got a seamless transition of the different parts of the textures there. We've got one more face to go, and that is the back. Press L over that back face. And this one is right side up, but we actually want it to be upside down. The reason being because we're going to rotate it in relation to this top face right here. So when we go up, we want it to be the same direction all the way. So this one is upside down in that direction. So I'm going to press R and 180. And let's give that another test. Awesome. Look at that. You did a great job. You've cut your first UVs and arranged them nicely. This is a very readable UV layout. The last thing you're going to need to do is make sure that there are no ends sticking off of this boundary. To make sure you scale everything down proportionally, have everything selected, press S, and scale down. Remember, those gaps in between are definitely good. We want our texturing artist, whether that's you, whether that's someone else, to be able to easily texture this without worrying about coloring outside of the lines. To export this UV layout as a PNG, go up to the UV map menu and then click Export UV Layout and name it whatever you want the PNG file to be named. Now that you're finished with the walls and floor, go ahead and move on to building the storage crates.